As Prime Minister, I want to speak to you simply and plainly about the grave emergency now facing our country. Jobs will be in danger and take-home pay will be less. We shall have to postpone some of the hopes and aims we have set ourselves for expansion and for our standard of living. We shall have a harder Christmas than we have known since the war.
About the deindustrialization of this country.
Georgian townhouses on the moon, the highest GDP per capita in the Milky Way. Small modular reactors under every village green. This is Anglo-futurism. We are back, listeners and viewers, with two new guests, Benedict Springbett and a rarely seen, sometimes heard, but never before on the podcast, Aeron, our producer. We are delighted to have you here with us. Tom, what are we going to be asking these two?
Benedict will be asking you about railways.
Excellent.
And Coasian economics.
Excellent.
Aeron, we have some questions from the fans for you.
Yeah.
Which we'll come back to.
I have to say, normally being outside of this experience, sort of being front on with you two, is so much more.
Normally you're sort of watching the car. You're watching the car crash from afar. Now you are in the car.
They're getting ruined. This is really funny. Now I'm here. It's, oh goodness, what am I doing?
Exactly. You're in the car now, so the 16-wheeler coming down the highway towards us is going to hit you too.
But a bit of history. We met you about 2 years ago.
Yep.
You've been our producer for about a year.
Yes.
You composed the intro.
Well, I think crucially, I sort of forced my way in.
No, we thought we were getting free production from you.
I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I was very
you helped
upset
with some of the earliest episodes.
Yeah, I was very upset at the sound quality that you two were managing early on. Listeners can go back and listen to the Samo Burya episode, which is exactly where I decide this has gone far enough. I did. It was just sort of starting off as me editing and improving the sound quality. And now I sort of tell you what to do, and I feel like you've not really noticed this slide in responsibilities.
We have noticed it. That's why we refer to you as our Epstein.
Brian
Epstein.
No, but someone, have you seen the new photos? The new. They're wonderful. He's with Ghislaine, like they're having a wonderful time. Say what you like about this guy, but they had a very fun social life. And there was real affection between them.
Of the two of you, which one is Jeffrey and which one is Ghislaine?
Oh, I thought you were going to say which one's Prince Andrew. No, Tom has never introduced me to a young lady.
Old ladies on the other hand.
Tom's circle of friends largely consists of earnest men.
No. One of my female friends is laughing very loudly in the audience there.
There we go.
There we go.
Although
I trafficked her from America.
From America, it's a transatlantic trafficking. Although I do feel she was my employer briefly when I was a freelance writer.
That's not how freelancing works. She's not your employer. That's the whole point of being freelance.
I have very limited understanding of how journalism works.
But maybe we could bring in one question from the fans for you, Aeron.
Yeah.
Unflashingly, it's which of me and Calum is the most annoying to edit?
Oh, it's Calum.
What?
I'm absolutely delighted.
Tom says way more often.
So the complexity.
No. Factually, we just had 60 seconds, and
Yeah.
Objectively, I'm less than you.
No, I repeated something. Go on.
So it's absolutely correct. Tom says a lot, and this is largely driven by you. If you go a bit earlier, he's more kind of reserved in the way he deals with you, and he's actually quite clean when he speaks, and you can feel the anxiety and I'm that's got to jump in.
This is when I'm like leaping over the mic, basically, and elbowing Calum at the same time, and then the ums come out.
I mean, Calum is complex because I have to edit Calum more because there are longer sort of stretches of
orations.
Yeah,
nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, it's quite good because, if I'm sitting there at sort of, 2 a.m., I've done all my other things for the day, I get round to the podcast and I sort of spy this kind of, 5-minute stretch that I basically don't have to listen to, right? I can just delete, find a few good words. And in some ways, that's highly rewarding. So I'm grateful, but... Yeah, you cause the most problems.
The listeners will actually know me as a very concise, to the point interviewer.
Oh, they're always bullying Calum, saying he goes on a bit.
He would never insert himself into the
exactly. Actually, listeners will know me more as the man who sounds more like, so, how was the thing that we're asking you about?
Yeah.
All my purple prose is cut out.
Yeah. Subscribers to the Anglo-Futurism podcast will be able to get uncut Calum editions.
Uncut Calum.
Uncut Calum. As far as I know, that's the default. But
standard Calum does come on. You have to pay more. You pay more for the cut.
That's the standard issue. But they are 4 times as long, those episodes.
Our subscribers are going to fall off a cliff.
So I'll be branching out into my own range of 3-hour-long, meditations, and then with one little question at the end. Anyway.
Benedict.
Hello.
What have you done to bring about a glorious Anglo future this year?
Well, happy you asked me that. This year I've been working on how we can give London a better railway network than Paris. Because the thing is that Paris has 5 Crossrail lines, and I and some friends have been working on a proposal to give London 6 Crossrail lines by...
Was it deliberately a single one?
No, well, that wasn't deliberate. It just was how the cookie crumbled. And 3 tube extensions, all of which can pay for themselves by building lots of new housing around the stations, which is precisely what the government currently wants to do.
There's some geek folklore which says the reason that we don't have railways that go through London is because the kind of greedy landowners basically prevented it. The Grosvenors and whoever else. Is that true?
To an extent,
so that's why you
true.
can't get a train from Newcastle to Southampton.
To an extent, it's true. The railway companies weren't particularly interested in the 19th century in cooperating with one another. There are some very entertaining stories about how they would just build lines to grab territory from each other. It was sort of cutthroat capitalism at its most ruthless. And so they did build a couple of lines across London, but they were mainly for freight. And so we were blessed with this inheritance of I can't remember exactly how many, it's 12 separate railway termini in London. And the idea behind Crossrail is that you just join those terminals up. So you massively increase the capacity for the commuter trains. So like the Elizabeth line, it was about 20 kilometres worth of tunnel, but it gave places like Romford, which obviously already had a station, a tube-like service right into central London. So we're working on a plan to build lots more of these.
And when you say joining up the hubs, does that mean what? Big station to big station? You just link them, so it means you don't have to do a big sort of
essentially
3 points of the square.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. So it's effectively building a tunnel underneath central London, and because central London's not that big in the grand scheme of things, these tunnels don't always have to be particularly long. I mean, there's one which we've teased already on Substack called the Oldcastle line, which is about 5 kilometres worth of tunnel to join up some stuff north of the river and south of the river, and of course would also relieve the tube network as well. I mean, I don't know if you've got any Northern Line commuters in the audience, but the Oldcastle line will be coming for your.
You've got one here.
For you?
I could be on
You live with me. We can be on the Victoria line. What are you talking about?
I go one stop, and then I get on the Northern Line.
Oh, you have a life outside when you hang out with me. Okay.
It's not chained to you.
Well, we were accused of camp in the first half. We'll be accused of
we refute all these allegations
of monogamy next.
Is now a good time for me to give you your Christmas present?
I'm worried now.
No, yes. It's fine. You'll. I think you'll really appreciate it.
I'll do the card.
Yeah,
I'll make the right
do the
noises.
card first. Yeah.
It's like
very high time preference, very civilized.
Yeah.
It's the
Oh, look at that! Look at that!
Very pretty card.
Can we get that in front of the cameras?
That was what
I think that deserves a newt.
Yeah, that's a new
Newt.
Thank you, Benedict.
Dear Calum, Tom, and Aeron, have a very Merry Christmas, full of flagons of warm ale. Hurrah! Here's to another year of Anglofuturism. Newt.
Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Right, go on then. Is it a pony?
You have to wait and see.
Is it a penguin?
Penguins are for life, not just for Christmas.
Yeah.
No, I think I can feel what it is.
I don't. Go on.
I do worry we'll be sort of sued by the Pingu Corporation at
It's
some
a
point.
pewter
Oh,
tankard.
that is fantastic.
And it's got
Talk us through it.
So it's a pewter tankard, and it's got a glass bottom on it. So historically, people would be drinking in pubs, and somebody would come along from the Royal Navy and try to press gang them into joining the Navy by like putting a coin in the bottom of their drink. And so this has got a glass bottom. I don't know if the camera can see this, so that you can tell if you're about to be press ganged into the Navy.
Well, Tom, I think I will be able to deploy it in a similar way. Whether you try and press gang me into doing the washing up. It
never works.
If you can't get a quid in my cup, if you can't get a quid into my cup, those plates are remaining unwashed.
Do you remember the drinking game Save the Queen from university? Where like so you're I don't know, you'll hold your thing,
Yeah.
and then if I don't know, I probably don't have a coin, but the game would be to chuck a coin in,
Yeah.
and then you have to save the queen by finishing your drink.
Oh, we called it pennying, but it's the same
Pennying,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
That is very kind.
This is
It is clean. Don't worry.
Can you give us some examples of which of the stations you would be joining up? Because the point is, in France you have the RER, which are big trains. They're separate from the metro. They run in a different way. They're bigger as well,
Yeah.
and they go faster, right?
Yeah, so this would be a very similar concept. So the most obvious one would be accelerating the plans for Crossrail 2, which will be joining up Clapham Junction all the way up to like a sort of King's Cross / Euston station, because the trains will be so long that you can actually serve both of them with like one 250 metre long train. 'Cause it's got like a King's Cross exit and Euston exit.
Okay.
And so then that can join up stuff heading northeast out into Hertfordshire, and stuff's heading southwest to places like Kingston and Richmond. And so it will relieve the Victoria Line, and it will also give these places a much better service.
so. Hang on, so you connect Harpenden to Richmond. This is the ultimate home counties line.
Not Harpenden, actually. And I misspoke about Richmond. That would be on a different one, which will go from Waterloo.
Don't worry, they're keeping the riffraff.
You're
They're keeping
not-
the riffraff
Yeah, yeah,
separate.
yeah.
You will not be uniting the Tillies.
This project did start as a genesis its genesis was trying to get a direct train between two of the friends of mine who were doing it. Between their houses. It's not got that anymore, but it did start as just pure self-interest. It's like I've crayoned a tube line purely to be able to get me to the Inns of Court more easily.
We've all done it.
Yeah.
We've all done it. For different reasons.
But Aeron, you spend your time. The podcast for you is, I mean, sort of similar to us. It's not the thing you spend all your time doing. You've decided that there is a problem even more pressing than turning our mangled dialogue into something coherent. What is
raising the birth rate?
raising the birth rate? Well, actually, the young Aeron is out in the audience, currently in utero, but we count him.
How many weeks till showtime?
Could be as few as sort of 3.5.
Well, we count
about
him.
6.
We count him in the audience numbers because it helps boost our attendance figures.
Is it true that you've chosen a name for him?
It is.
Is it true that it's Athelstan?
No comment. Listeners
No. We know
make
the
their
first
own.
letter. We know the first letter, which is a C. So I'm obviously crossing my fingers for the man who inspired him.
This is sort of a fun experiment because you two, you're not famed for the sort of, hard-hitting, investigative kind of grilling of guests. So,
What's
the name? I don't want to tell you.
Oh, right then. All right then. We'll move on. Oh no.
It's Nigel. It's actually Nigel. It's going to be the first Nigel
I
born in
guess
this country
there
in
is-
several years.
I guess-
Nigel with a C, though.
I guess there is no way of finding out this information. He said no. we'll have to move on to the next question.
No. We cannot tolerate this resistance to our authority. Let's impose a difficult game on Aeron right now as punishment. Should it be just a minute or life in the UK?
I think it should be birth rates. I think you have to talk about
right now.
talk about. So, Aeron, how did you personally raise the birth rates level of Britain in 60 seconds?
Well,
No. Okay. Okay.
It's very important we don't get demonetized on YouTube.
2, 1. You can talk about the British birth rate. Go.
Oh God.
Scott?
Right, so the British birth rate has been in decline really since the baby boomer generation, famously, although ours is a little bit different to the US's, though not too far away. And it's an issue which, for many people, seems like it's slightly old-fashioned. You know, you're pressuring someone to have children, you're pressuring them to get married. This seems like the morality of a bygone age. But people forget the children and stock of a country, if you will, are the lifeblood of its future. And I genuinely believe that we, like many other Western nations, and indeed developed nations around the world, have entered into a kind of civilizational suicide. And there are many great people doing sort of policy-level interventions on this and thinking about ways you can incentivize childbirth. However, you know, I tend to be quite skeptical of government intervention. I think you can just do things.
You've taken a hands-on approach.
Yeah.
A man who likes to work with his hands, you know, get his elbows in. And
You know, the elbow...
This is Calum's most extraordinary interruption just a minute.
he won it! He did it! He succeeded!
I was well past
He succeeded!
The elbows...
The elbow grease, you know,
it's,
get some babies here.
It's not for everyone, the elbows.
Poor old Ellen in the audience, wincing.
No. Well, okay. So you've got one son on the way.
Yes.
How many more are we expecting?
At least 2.
At least 2.
My
I'm just
grandfather...
checking Ellen's expression.
Yeah,
to see
exactly.
At least 2 sons or at least 2 additional children?
Well,
At least 2 more sons whose names begin with C.
my grandparents' generation, you know, they had 8. And I live in the shadow of this as a, controversially for the podcast, an Irish Catholic. You know, it's very important, the Fenian, etc. But yeah, you know, we'll start with 3 and then negotiate, I think.
Yeah, you know,
Pliable elbow grease.
turn our eyes outwards.
But
She's not
Benedict can
frowning.
help with later on. He's
Ellen's not
a
frowning.
master of, you know, economic negotiations.
Well,
It's a huge positive externality, my love. You know,
Speaking of,
and Aeron has beautifully set us up. Benedict, you have a view that many problems, such as one's the love of one's life, deciding that actually having 8 children is not necessarily what they want, is simply a problem of externalities, where the capitalist machinery has not sufficiently created a market yet for these meeting of these desires, i.e., Aeron should really be able to buy futures on his own babies, and then enter into an open bidding market where he's able to acquire them at a price set by the
defeat
market.
his wife on the battleground of financialization.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say she is absolutely mogging me. Her portfolio is way up. She YOLO'd into Build-A-Bear a while ago. It's like 60-70% up. She wanted to do Pop Mart. I said,
Alan,
no, Hong Kong.
Are you long Build-A-Bear?
She's long Build-A-Bear.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, she's about to be the one of the biggest customers, so she's expecting the 8 children to be big Build-A-Bear buyers.
I've given up.
What else are you long on?
Exactly. Yeah.
Stop telling us.
That's my quant.
So Benedict, given that we've already hypothesized the existence of a market for one's own children, the acquisition thereof, not the selling of, maybe you'd like to tell us about how we could fix pub noise complaints.
Yeah. So many kinds of economic activity produce what economists in their very poetic fashion call externalities. I much prefer the term social costs because it's nicer to say. It's like a noisy pub, for instance. It's great for the pub's patrons, great for the pub because it gets more takings, but it can be a bit of an irritation for the neighbours. And like pollution of all kinds is like sort of the prototypical example of this. And there's a bit of a tendency amongst a lot of people to instinctively think that pollution equals bad, and that sort of by implication the optimal amount of pollution in the world should be basically as close to zero as we can possibly achieve. I think that's just clearly wrong, because actually pollution obviously is bad in excess, but in order to make stuff, you do need to pollute a bit. The optimal level of pollution is greater than zero, and so that the reasoning that it's always bad is just wrong. And there was an economist in the 20th century called Ronald Coase who really upended this logic on its head within the economics profession. And in particular, he pointed out that the problem of pollution is reciprocal. So if we have an example of a noisy pub where the punters are enjoying lots of pleasantly warm ales and getting a bit rowdy, then obviously that is causing a cost to the residents nearby because they might not be able to get much sleep. If, however, the residents stop the pub's customers from being able to drink and be merry, then that's imposing a cost on the customers and also on the pub. So either way, somebody is imposing a cost on the other. It's a reciprocal problem. And therefore we need to abandon the idea that pollution is always and everywhere a bad thing, and instead find ways to basically set things up so that whichever imposes the fewer costs of society, either the nearby residents or the pub, gets to do that.
But there's one level beyond this, right? Which is that actually you could reimburse someone for the effects. So in the pollution case, the hypothetical is that you could sue the producer of the pollution for polluting one's air around them. But in your case, what you'd purchase the difference between one's enjoyment of whilst being rowdy, whilst being against versus being quiet. Because
in theory, let's say a simple example, and I like this example of a particular pub in South London, which it's overlooked by one singular flat, which is allegedly, I have no idea this story is true or not, but it's a fun one, so I'm going to run with it. Allegedly is overlooked by a High Court judge who's managed to obtain an injunction to shut the pub's beer garden at 7. Now, in theory, if he had this injunction, then the pub could just buy him out for a price. Like, he might take it in monetary terms, or they might pay for additional insulation. They could even, if they had a very deep pocket, just buy the flat off him entirely. So the point is that this problem, which looks like a sort of insurmountable problem of clash of economic interests, can just be solved by bargaining.
Well, on that note, we've actually got some scenarios for you that some intractable problems that many, I think, will experience over the Christmas season, and we're hoping that potentially the deadlock that many are stuck in, similarly to this High Court judge, can maybe be ended by applying a Coasian Christmas.
Benedict, welcome to Coasian Christmas. Aunt Margaret insists on playing Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas on repeat. Uncle Gerald claims this constitutes psychological torture. If we are being good Coasians, should Gerald be compensating Margaret for her loss of festive atmosphere, or vice versa?
I think that so long as Margaret could have a bit of fun.
60 seconds.
She could play it once or two, but frankly, it is a dreadful song. I think that there are other solutions to this. Gerald can conceivably just go in another room. So it does sort of depend, what's the layout of the house. If he could just go and avoid her, maybe he wants to do that anyway. Then she can enjoy her din in peace and quiet.
What if it were more tasteful music, such as "Hark the Herald Angels Sing"?
Well, I think the problem is
King's College Chapel, Cambridge.
Excellent, yes. If it's not St Carol's, of course, it's a moral good for everybody to listen to it
on repeat.
Yeah, obviously.
And I'm interested. How would Gerald form a market to bring in an alternative person to him to listen to it, and thus, bear the burden someone else rather than him?
A very elegant solution. He could potentially, if there's a small child of the family who, is just a baby still, could put the baby in there to listen to it instead, because the baby won't mind too much.
Margaret doesn't feel lonely. It's
Exactly.
fine,
Yeah.
I like the idea of an auction system that allows you to buy access to the Christmas family that you desire. Thus, the good families would put up slots. We've got an extra leaf on our table. We can pull it out, put in an extra chair. But we're looking for sound character, fast at charades. Keeps their elbows in, and doesn't have too much gravy.
Won't critique the cooking.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of potential here for a greater financialization, and the city is really missing out. Well, I've got a next
He's got some siblings he wants to say.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's a great idea. Yeah,
Sorry, Iona.
Yeah, exactly. Christmas family tech.
Coasian Christmas Part 2.
You note that the judge's quiet evening shouldn't outweigh dozens of pubgoers' enjoyment. How do we weigh my mother-in-law's right to critique the turkey against the collective morale of the other 11 people at the table?
I think we should weight the collective morale quite highly. I mean, mothers-in-law, they've been the butt of jokes for millennia. I think that
they just feel things more strongly, though.
They do, but I think there is something quite Lindy about mother-in-laws just being quite annoying. And so for any given mother-in-law, it seems fairly likely that they will derive, far too much pleasure of the bad kind out of going, I wouldn't have done it quite like that.
It's sort of information in the market, right? You need the mother-in-law there to provide the
She's like the court
counterweight.
jester who voices the unsayable.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. However, obviously it does cause a loss of morale, but frankly, they should have just done the bloody turkey better.
It's always terrible, controversial, but lamb, obviously a superior Christmas dinner.
No, goose.
Goose is best.
Yeah.
Traditional.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we're having goose, but at least I know what the high status option is.
You should do the St. John's goose Christmas feast if you really want to be high status. You cook an entire goose, like you confit the legs, you roast the carcass, you make pate out of the liver. It's delicious.
Well, I've launched a sort of year-long campaign with my family to earn the right. Maybe I should ask to buy the right to cook Christmas dinner. I failed in my campaign.
Should have offered a higher price.
The market has yet failed me once again. But I was aiming for a pre-Columbian expansion Christmas, which would have been a peacock that you skin with all the feathers on. You take off, you roast it with a spit kind of up its neck, so it's raised up, and then you put the feathers back on, and you serve it with various peas pottages and pies in the shape of animals, and then you put meat that does not correspond to that animal in with various stewed fruit.
Bex looks absolutely. Look at her disgusted face. She's about to chun.
Do you think there is a market though for like a slightly pretentious restaurant in London that feeds you as if you were a Tudor king?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what St. John was meant to be.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed.
Well, it's very like sparse and like bright white lighting on the inside. Are you saying that it should be full of like minstrels and people playing green sleeves?
Yes.
So
you can chuck the bones over your shoulder like Henry VIII.
And there are no ceramics invented, so you just have to like eat off a large piece of bread.
Excellent. Yeah.
Trenchers. You're handed a trencher as you come in, and you have to sort of shepherd it around, and then when the bottom falls out of it, you have to leave.
And then you watch a cockfight afterwards, uncut.
So it reminds me, weren't you two referred to recently as sort of the top drawer of the policy space?
Yeah.
Can't remember if I shared this with you or if it was shared with me.
Well, okay,
I might have thought it.
Imagine I hardly know what top drawer is.
Top drawer?
They go. Is it a guy or two guys who go to restaurants and they say how nice the restaurant is?
The problem,
it's sort of client restaurant journalism.
The problem but there's a very sort of sink pints, very West London atmosphere to the whole thing.
The problem with comparing us to Top Jaw is there are two men and they look quite similar, but there is one who is clearly more photogenic and he's in front of the camera, and there's one who's clearly much less photogenic who sits behind the camera. Which, if we're going to make that comparison, it must be taken into consideration, is all I'm saying. I think we have one more scenario for you, Benedict. prepare yourself. Christmas crackers produce a brief, loud bang and a terrible joke. The
Much like
externalities.
Calum on a Friday night.
How do I get reimbursed for that joke? The externalities are obvious, and yet we persist. Is this market failure, or is the paper crown somehow sufficient compensation?
I think it's market success. I mean, the fact that we can share in such joy, such beautiful gifts, such festivities, without any regard for health and safety. Because like, if you invented Christmas crackers today, like nobody would allow them. Like you'd have to like have a license for it. So like fireworks, like which people really enjoy, and like so long as they're restricted to about sort of 2 or 3 evenings a year, then they're fine. But if you try to introduce them today, like, oh no, we'll have people like setting them off all year round. They'll be setting their houses on fire in the neighbourhood. When actually they're just clearly not a problem. Like we shouldn't worry about externalities quite as much as we do.
So actually, what the market failure is that we need more. We need more.
I think he wants to put fireworks in the crackers.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Add a little free sort of danger over the Christmas meal.
Yeah, we don't really have a problem with. There are far fewer fires than there used to be.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
In London.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say there isn't a problem with fire.
The optimal amount of fire is non-zero.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to target.
Well, it's like one of those great forests in the kind of Pacific Northwest, right, where it helps to have.
Well, the big reason why I've got far fewer fires now is because people don't have open fireplaces. It's got nothing to do with the excitement levels of Christmas crackers.
I like the idea of having Roman candles that I could sort of light and fire across the table at my
It's your annoying aunt.
at my relatives.
Benedict,
Yes.
you have not had your turn at Just a Minute yet.
Oh God.
So here it is. It's coming down the tracks right now. The theme is Britain's railway system in 50 years. We're going to give you a few seconds to collect your thoughts.
No hesitation, deviation, repetition, or
Declanism. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm on a train heading from London up to Glasgow. It's a maglev. As I go through stations where connections immaculately happen between lines that have been restored from the beaching axe, I look at passenger trains carrying people into central Manchester and Birmingham. I see freight trains taking ores from the British Antarctic Territory up to great factories that populate the whole northwest of the country. I'm satisfied that we have managed to restore the world's greatest railway system to pole position. Trains are as punctual as they are in Switzerland and Japan. Nobody complains about them. They're no longer a national laughingstock. Indeed, it's quite funny to think that once they were seen as a really big problem.
Bravo.
I was sort of welling up there.
And the polls gag as well.
I have to say, this second cohort of guests have performed rather better. And despite the fact that there is a professional podcaster, you both shaped up very well. Very well.
No comment.
The LFG podcast, I'm sure, is barely edited. Anyway,
She doesn't have a mic. She can't reply. So
Exactly,
we
we have-
can shit talk Bex as much as we like up here.
we're not proper journalists, so we don't offer a right of reply. But Aeron, single-handedly getting your leg over is not the only thing you've been doing this year.
It takes two. You know.
It takes two legs, 4 legs, making the beast with 2 backs. But critically, you are also a technical innovator.
Yes.
You are solving the problem of coordination. You clearly didn't have any problems coordinating, but other people might. How are you fixing this?
That's an awkward jumping off point, because you sort of instinctively want to say, well, 2 people coordinating is quite easy, but sort of the N+1 case, bringing in 3, 4.
3? I didn't know that was
Well,
allowed.
exactly. This is the thing. It's a terrible starting point. But yeah, a friend that I met through Anglofuturism, a similarly aligned person, came to me with an idea. and it was to do something about the way people think about how they meet up and how they organise that and how they find useful things in life to do. We've kind of worked on this for a little while now and iterated through various ideas. And we were recently in SOTA Letters explaining that our vision now is that we think we have a sort of taxonomy of what, people see in an event, a kind of who, what, when sort of idea that in general, if you're trying to think about something to do, those are the problems you want to solve. And we have built a system which is semi-secret, but uses some ideas in embeddings and just in general the kind of vector maths you can do with that kind of thing to solve those problems for people instantaneously whenever they want to do something. We think in the first instance, super cool for, going to coffee with your friends or organising a large pub drinks. People who came to the pub drinks, of course, will have used an early demo of Palendr. But our vision really is that we want to make it easier for all of the people who are currently incredibly disparate in this space and frankly duplicating work a lot of the time. Not to name any names, but I have noticed recently that several groups have made a dashboard independently. Duplicating this kind of work is inefficient, and there's lots of things that we should be doing together. And I imagine most of that is because of coordination costs, and reducing those coordination costs is our kind of main motivation.
I can think of someone else who's been duplicating work, actually, sitting out in the audience right now. But
exactly. I mean, you only really need one podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A Telian market efficient solution would be everyone just listens to our podcast. And you don't need to go anywhere else.
So if you subscribe to the Anglo-Futurism podcast, we will use this to pay LFG to stop their podcast.
Very efficient. Very efficient.
Yeah. Doesn't society become more unstable if you allow people to coordinate better?
Unstable for whom, right? I mean, I think we have a system in place, whether it's in government, in business, which operates off a model that worked quite well in the 20th century. It's quite hierarchical. It's based off certain concepts of career progression and status, which are repeatedly shown to be nonsense. James Phillips, who we had on the podcast very recently, wrote about his experience during COVID and how the current COVID inquiry is failing because it's calling a lot of people who at the time had very senior titles, they were the head of whatever, but basically did absolutely nothing in the COVID response. Many of the more junior people who had a can-do attitude and were less interested in, covering their arse most of the time, I imagine, were pivotal in that and haven't been called as witnesses to the COVID inquiry, even though many of them have requested to be called. So, yes, of course, if you're launching some sort of method of coordinating people that in some sense opens up an asymmetric capability for certain kinds of groups, there's a risk there, right? But frankly, our reputation as dissident intellectuals means that I'm quite comfortable with that risk. And go on.
I mean, clearly there is that those with energy will take advantage of this, and those without energy then are left by the wayside. We are clearly on the side of those with energy.
I mean, to be clear, we really do want people just to, there's a silly example. I have a group of friends who, we meet kind of every few weeks or so, and you always find you end up in this kind of local minima of no one's quite bothered to organise the right time or the right location. So it's like, shall we go to the pub on, the usual place, right? And this is unsatisfying. So outside of the whole disrupting the government thing, you could just use this for a bit of fun, but
it's a dual use technology.
It's a dual use, by design. But I think also a lot of wonderful things happen when people do those quite casual things together, and great things grow out of them. So we're not just trying to create asymmetric capabilities for dissidents, but if it happens, it's perfectly fine.
Aeron, how does Palendr actually work? What's the user interface? Like, how does an individual interact with this programming?
Yeah, so the idea is that, we'll say at the outset, there's no friends list, and this is not meant to be a social network, but it could look like one at a first glance. But really, it's a machine for eliciting preferences, which I feel like, the economist over here will go, yes. But what I mean by this is that, we all have a lot of things that we want.
It's like Partiful meets Palantir.
The funny thing is, obviously, we have the palendr name, and the amount of people who get Palantir and palendr confused, no relation. But yeah, in some sense, we want to reveal information about people, and you do this by giving that information freely. And you can think of it a little bit like you'd use Hinge, in the sense that you can answer little prompts and you can say things that you might like about yourself. And from this, we extract some of the meaning behind those words and then put you into a little space where people who are close in meaning to you, if you like, or events which are close to you, then are a short hop mathematically, and we can then tell you that these things would be good to connect with.
And have you learned what I think has been the thing that you've learned about kind of human attitudes to meeting up and forming these connections that you've kind of learned from doing this?
It's funny. I obviously have a background in psychology and neuroscience, and so you come to it with a certain level of cynicism about these things because you've seen the studies. I think one of the most interesting things has actually been, obviously, when you're making something new like this, you worry that people won't care or won't like it, right? You don't really feel the spark. But when I've shown it to people and when they've used it and kind of seen what it can do, there's actually quite a lot of excitement. And, to be, I think, slightly trite, I think there is a general frustration at the moment with the quality of interactions in the real world. There's been writing recently on how hollow real-world interactions are becoming. And this is, in some sense, strange to me because, we're in a community of people sort of with Anglo-futurism and the sort of general space of British progress where we know a lot of passionate people kind of organised around the same thing. And I think maybe what we're doing here is giving people the opportunity to form more of those communities. Ultimately, the communities we're in were formed partly by some very high agency, thoughtful people who, pushed some people in the right direction. And there were a few big sort of Schelling points that people could organise around. But those kind of constraints on group formation, I think, they don't scale, and I don't think they should be a hard requirement. And what I hope is that people are seeing that, you can just do this, and you can meet up with a few people who share your aims in life and organise towards something better. And, whether that's something grand like, I don't know, the Crossrail disruption group, or just, whether it's homeschooling or a book club or something like this, I think all of them carry the potential to actually be, truly great things if the cost coordination are brought down.
Well, we hope it goes spectacularly for you nearly next year, although not so spectacularly that you can't produce our podcast anymore.
Benedict, because I think there's an interesting overlap here, which is that a lot of these circles that are doing work like this have formed. They are in person, right? Despite the narrative that communities form online and that's the future, the evidence seems to be that groups and circles of people who meet all the time together in person with each other have been far more effective. What's your experience of this?
Totally. It's hard to really grok how another person thinks until you spend quite a bit of time with them, preferably over a couple of pints in person. And then once you have a better mental model for how another person sees the world, you can much more easily predict what they're going to think about something, and that just oils the wheels so much more easily. I think the reason why this Crossrail project, which has been a pretty lengthy undertaking, has worked well is that we all knew each other beforehand. So we all have a pretty good idea about what we think about things, even when we're collaborating remotely. And I think it always has been really great. I mean, you were chatting about this earlier, but the number of groups that have sprung up in London to try to bring more people together. And I've been along to a load of these events. Sometimes the conversations do feel like I'm repeating like the things that I read a blog post about 4 years ago and I thought that everybody knew about it, but I'm having to explain it to somebody for the first time. Like, you do get some of that, but also you meet people with whom you can form friendships, collaborate, sometimes date. And it's noteworthy how little of there is. This seems to be in other countries. I was in California a couple of months ago at a conference, and it was almost all Brits and Americans. Like, it was like a pro-progress, pro-growth, pro-abundance conference. Almost all Brits and Americans, because in continental European countries, there just isn't this sort of attitude. And I think that in a way, the fact that things have got so bad in Britain is actually a blessing in disguise, because it's tipped past a point where there are loads of people who really, really want to fix things. Whereas in, say, France, things are pretty bad, but not quite as bad as over here. And also I suppose the French response to anything getting really bad would be to, start another revolution, rather than, whereas ours is in, Anglo-Saxon fashion, to set up a new group to campaign for something.
I mean, it was such a huge part of our political history, right? I mean, the Tory party famously, through much of the 20th century, was a sort of marriage club, right? And to a lesser extent, I think the Labour Party operated the same way. And obviously we've lost those spaces.
Yeah, and the thing is, Britain has such a long tradition of clubs, partly because our law made it really easy for people to form clubs, because on the continent, in like the medieval period, rulers were really sceptical of anybody who was able to associate with one another, like medieval and early modern period, that is. You basically had to get permission from the king. In England, because of a slightly strange quirk in our law, you didn't, which meant that, for instance, it was really easy to set up the London Stock Exchange as, in effect, a mutual society. It was really easy to set up the early cooperative movement or the working men's clubs, and then as well as the private members' clubs. And so we had this enormous tradition of just starting a new society, starting a new club to solve a tangible problem. And I think it is, still going. I mean, what I've just talked about, the number of organisations starting suggests that, like, the spirit is still there, even though people, I think, do it quite a lot less than they used to.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely is a reduction. I mean, you read the Pickwick Papers, right, which must be sort of the dearest love letter to clubs and the ridiculous characters that assemble for some unified purpose. It's interesting. I mean, LFG is an interesting example because they don't charge, right? And there's a sort of an aversion to people paying to be part of a club. And I suppose also rules about you have to be open to everyone means that freedom to associate is kind of reduced because you can't, the group is defined kind of by who it doesn't let in as well. Do you think that hinders or impedes this sort of social effort?
I think that you need to have a degree of selectivity. I don't think in a way of form like admissions criteria, but I think the system of blackballing is quite a good way, because whenever you run like a big social event, there is a risk that if it's an open invite policy, like one person comes along and ends up causing a lot of drama. And so with clubs having to be proposed and seconded by members and or being able to be blackballed by somebody else is just quite a sensible way, like keeping it fairly open to new people, but also making sure that you can maintain a degree of like keeping out people who are going to be really annoying. And I think also like similarly getting people to pay a bit can be quite useful, just to force them to show a bit more commitment. But it's also, I think, a bit different if you're LFG, where you're trying to be a campaigning group, and there it probably makes most sense to just make it free, versus if you're trying to start up a sort of Anglo-futurist members club. Hint, hint, great idea.
We don't talk about Anglo-futurist members club.
We've got a few more questions from fans and friends. Aeron. One is from Jacob Goodwin, friend of the show, who asks, who is the greatest English composer?
And we asked this because
this is a real softball question.
Well, because Aeron, you do think of yourself as a composer, right? Still,
Aeron is a composer.
So, yeah, there's an answer to this. So this was obviously raised, and I heard some conversation around it, and people propose sort of Handel or Purcell, things like this. Number one, Handel is German, but also that era really from the sort of Baroque and roll of his stuff.
I have a playlist on Spotify called Baroque Out with Your Cockhouse, which I will share with you after the recording.
Thank you.
That might need to be cut.
Way up. way up into the Romantic period, right? There really isn't actually that much of a distinctly British style of music, right? The continent dominated. Some people would put forward, a little bit later, someone like Benjamin Britten as the greatest British composer. I think it's indecent for an Englishman to compose opera, just flatly. Like, it doesn't work. It has never worked. And also, Britten is very of that. He reminds me in some ways of sort of Lucian Freud, a little bit Martin Amis, of that early 20th century kind of, I'm smoking a lot and I feel very sad about decline and I'm just going to wallow in that, right? I see those people as, part of that very sad era in British art that actually, they lived relatively well, right? A lot of their sadness was that they weren't living as sort of Renaissance princes, but it's very self-indulgent at the same time. So I don't like any of that. I have really two answers to the greatest British composer. One is very early. I think Thomas Tallis is outstanding. And I share the view with Schoenberg, who has been criticized on this podcast before, that the basis for all music should actually come from vocal music, and it's the gold standard. I think Tallis's choral works, and in general the early English choral tradition is just stunning, and there is absolutely nothing in the world which holds a candle to it.
It's very annoying that Spam and Allium has had entered the popular consciousness the past couple of decades thanks to 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes.
The version of it that I have in my Apple Music has like 50 Shades of Grey on the album cover because it's the version that they used in the film.
Who doesn't feel a little frisson when they're listening to Tallis? In any case, much later on, and this is to your point about composition, I will defend to the death that Brian Eno is one of Britain's greatest composers, and I'll tell you for why. Because Eno, among his many achievements, obviously is the sort of progenitor of ambient music, which was a very original approach to music and a concept around what music is in the modern world. Clearly opera isn't really mainstream anymore. No one really goes to symphonies anymore unless they're very passionate about it. Obviously, there's lots of pop music, but Eno was very early to the idea that music would become like wallpaper. He's long before sort of streaming, but he has this view that music can just sort of live with you and be in the background and should fit into there. And that was the idea of ambient. I think that's wonderful. But also, he composed the little piano riff that was on, I think, Windows 98. It's like 98 or 2000. Sort of do. Yeah, that's a Brian Eno composition, right?
Yeah.
And
an amazing bit of trivia.
That conception of the composer, where if you look through history, composers have always, we think of them as these great artists, but Bach was working in a church. He was just producing church music daily. Obviously, as you get into the classical period, they're composing dances for the court and things like this. And there's a growth of that pop idea into the Romantic period. But all of this basically disappears come the 20th century, and a lot of the classical composers now are writing for other composers. And it's art music is the sort of term that's sometimes thrown around now. It's not really music that anyone would listen to for any reason other than kind of academic interest and sort of patting each other on the back, with some notable exceptions. Nico Muhly is very good, but real music now exists in these little sort of moments in our life, and to compose like a 3-second piano ditty that plays every time you turn on your computer, I think is wonderful. And on that note, I think doing a sort of jazz into like string orchestration, Anglo-fusion piano over the top, podcast theme tunes, so many are fine. Right, and when I composed the Anglo-Futurism theme tune, someone said to me, "Oh, but I think a podcast theme tune should be like a warm bath. It just sort of gets you in. You don't really notice it, right? The rest is history has this, or the rest is politics. Little sort of jaunty ditties." I disagree. I think they should be considered much more seriously, and I try to take it a little bit more seriously because the message they can bring. Someone has said to me before that who now has anything to say about the deindustrialization of this country? Like, it gets them up in the morning. They wake up and they're like, who does? Someone has to. And I think that's very powerful, and I wish more people would do it.
Why do you think there are so few great English composers? Because I've written about this, about the fact that different like European countries have different strengths in different arts. And obviously England has an immensely good literary tradition. Yeah. But when it comes to painting, obviously got the Pre-Raphaelites, but not that much that could be described as a sort of an art movement that originated within England. Yeah. And with composers, not very many. Whereas you compare to say the French or the Germans, it's composers coming out of your ears. Why is that?
I mean, we also have no good concert halls, kind of infamously. The acoustics are all bad. I mean, I think there are different views you can take on it, but, the center of gravity for much of the years, sort of 1700s, wasn't quite England. By the time that we get to a position where England, can be a patron of the arts, which, really is the Stuart period is kind of where this starts growing and then going into later monarchies. The fashion is for continental things. Right, the kind of things, because royalty was just such a core part of funding classical music and determining the trends, and the buyers of that classical music in England and later Great Britain fundamentally like to buy more French and German things. Now, I will say the Victorian period, right? We do have some good composers. I will grant that someone like Vaughan Williams, Elgar is good. However, they were composers at the sort of, they just had the Industrial Revolution, right? And not one of them wrote a symphony to the steam engine, right? Not one of them.
When in fact they bring back folk.
Exactly, because it was all about these kind of pastoral fantasies, right? And the fact that the elite fashion at the time was to completely reject industry. You had to return to myth. And so while I think a lot of their work is very beautiful, I think ultimately they are part of the guilty men of history, right? Because you don't really get that sense of music kind of coming in with machinery until much later, the kind of, Steve Reich, Philip Glass, right? They're making these wonderful pieces that engage with the industrial age. And that's far too late, and we should have done it. But it's because it was basically very high status to be at the Royal Albert Hall, playing the violin about a bird. Right?
It's Handel that feels like a kind of exquisite piece of machinery, and then Vaughan Williams
Baroque is good for this reason, but as stated,
I mean, this I think cuts a lot to the heart of what we talk about. Is it possible to in the world of machinery and a very democratized commercial world where people can acquire products and people live roughly on the same level in a lot of ways, everyone has the same iPhone. Is it possible anymore to have these high feats of artistic value? Like can we produce beauty in the modern age in a democratic and, flattened has a pejorative connotations, but flattened world?
I mean, I think, the idea of the great work, right? This has been talked about in the literary world. Why does no one do the big, long novel that's, everyone's very impressed by? I do think that time is not now in various ways. To some extent, it still exists in cinema, and it's maybe instructive to think about why we do have the concept of sort of auteur directors still, but novelists and musicians, it's gone away to a certain extent. And I think that's a lot to do with the consumption habits and the mediums, where cinema still retains a certain scarcity in that you have to go and sit down, to enjoy it. Whereas, frankly, there are too many books published because no one's reading them. But the same with music, right? Especially not Calum.
Tom, I'll quiz you on mine.
I noted that, all the talk of the reading competition just sort of died away very quietly.
No, it's still going. Calum and I have a contest between us in several parts, including but who can amass the biggest stack of books.
Yeah, indeed. But in general, we're sort of in this post-literate society, right? And people are reading, but the consumption of books has gone away. And I think the notion of a novelist who is seen as having something profound to say about the moment, which, as recently even as, someone like David Foster Wallace in the US, right, that was still very much a thing. We don't see those anymore. I mean, our recent case has maybe been Sally Rooney, who in some senses explicitly retreats from that concept and says, I don't want to, engage with the great work. So I don't know. I think we're not likely to see symphonies come back anytime soon. And it's very hard to imagine even anything like it, given the way music has gone. And this is, again, where I name Brian Eno, that actually a lot of the greatness of music now is just in little enrichments around life. There's something nice about when you press the button, the sound effect being perfect. Something nice about incidental music just gliding you along. And I see that as a different kind of greatness. I think it's the Egyptian period, right, where sculptors, wouldn't sign their name on works. Because they were just, making incidental things. There was no concept of the artist. And to some extent, I think music is returning to that.
I like the idea that if text is going to return to simply something in the background, that the auteur is the great tweeter, that has actually captured the medium that text is most engaged with in the modern day.
I think there's a very strong case for that.
Yeah.
You can think of many names.
You can. There are great tweets. There are great tweets that
Boosters
sit
of our time.
Yes, exactly. Reminisce. I'm struck by reading someone's JPEG of a I don't know, a drill tweet. Anyway, having exposed my reading habits, I think we will wrap up there. Thank you both for coming up to our space station here in the Docklands. A humorous and impossible separation between where we spiritually are and where we actually find ourselves, and also to our earlier guests, Andrew Kramer and Bex Ray. Thank you, listeners, very much. We've had a wonderful year.
It's been a blast.
A lot of you have listened.
Thank you to you two as well. The guests never thank you enough. You do.
We agree.
You do a fabulous job
on this podcast.
And I will say it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you sort of 3 to 4 times over per episode and going through and editing out the
treasures
ums
every
and
that
the
moves.
misspeaking.
Do you dream about their voices?
Sometimes.
Callum snores certainly interfere with my dreams.
Infamously, I can identify Tom's by sight. Like I know the sound wave.
Can you do it with your hands?
Yeah, it's sort of this.
Do it for the camera.
This kind of shape, right? It's a lovely
What's
sort of
this
ovaloid.
kind
It's an ovaloid sort of sound wave. They're so regular, and this really impresses me. Callum's all
Until
over
the
the
point
place.
where it matters, where we did 60 seconds. I just want that on the record
Yes.
forever that I
Yes.
objectively am less than Calum.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And
on that note,
whilst I fell at the first hurdle in the Anglo-Futurist steeplechase, Calum is flat on his face. Thank you
Benedict,
all.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bex, Andrew, studio audience, thank you very much.